With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoe's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful ends for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more. Welcome, friends and allies, to the Exploring More podcast. I'm Michael Thompson. I'm with my brothers, Greg Sailors, Tom Benner, and S.J. Jennings. Are we in part 3?
Yeah.
This particular series we're in is celebrating the incredible subject of intimacy, oneness, connectedness with God, a pillar for Zoe, the number one pillar for Zoe, foundational for us. And so we just want to continue to tell some stories and to share what we've been exploring and learning about intimacy with God and intimacy with one another.
Yeah.
It's something that Jesus came to arrange for, to get sin out of the way, to build a bridge to us, and then to cross it and come after us. I know there's symbols of this, that he kind of sits in the middle and waits. No, he crosses the bridge and comes after us.
Yeah, speaking of symbols, in the first episode, I texted my wife while we were on the air. You know, I'm so glad I get to be a witness to your life. I got the symbol of a giant heart in return from her, so that was good. She came
That
back.
is good.
She came across the bridge. And
Not a girl.
Yeah.
We love Sherry.
yeah, we do. She loves me.
Yeah, that's good. And just continuing to explore and tell some stories, I got two things. One, I want to read this quote from the Sacred Romance. We read one last week from Brent Curtis's and John Eldredge, who co-authored the Sacred Romance. They wrote, "Most Christians have lost the life of their heart, and with it, their romance with God."
Yeah.
Most Christians have lost the life of their heart, and with it, their romance with God.
Do you think most Christians know that there's a romance with God?
No, I didn't.
I didn't either.
Didn't. And I think that's how we've been kind of tricked or duped, even within the Christianity and the churchianity and religious circles, is that we were made for service, and obedience is kind of the highest calling. Forgiveness is so that you can be a servant.
Mm-hmm.
And we write about this, talk about this. There's such a progression in the scriptures. I won't get into every address of every passage, but the bottom line is the progression goes like this. There is the potter and the clay, where he gets his hands on us, he molds. Then we graduate to a master and servant relationship.
Right.
Master, what does this mean? Master. And then Jesus says to his disciples, his servants, right? "I no longer call you servants. I call you friends." That's number 3, the progression to friendship. Now you're starting to move into intimacy land. Then there's father-son and father-daughter. This is a powerful relationship in itself. And then, if that's not enough, that we're family, right? Friends and family. There's discounts there, right? There's privileges there.
Yeah.
The last one is this most intimate example of bride and bridegroom.
Exactly.
And so when we have settled for servitude or settled for kind of the potter and clay, then that's the kind of life you get, SJ, with God, is that you've settled for it. That's the kind of life you get.
I think we have such a problem in this message about our identity. You know, we talk a lot about I'm nothing but a fill in the blank, right?
Sinner, yeah.
It happens all the time. We hear it all the time. I'm nothing but a fill in the blank. So how are we going to believe what you say if we believe that?
Yeah.
If we believe that about ourselves?
Yeah. So if you believe a lie, it acts and plays out in your life as if it was true. And when you find out there is more and that you've settled for less, most people move forward. Most people graduate. Most people take the next step and see that there is more. And it can't just be in a brochure. We've talked about this. We talk about this. It needs to be encountered and experienced. God wants to be encountered and experienced. And a sad story that you make me think of, one of my daughters visited a church last week. A friend invited her, and friendship was important, and it was a way to step in there. And so she came back. I talked to her, and I said, "Well, how was church?" And she goes, "Oh my gosh, Dad, it was awful." I said, really? I know the church. I know. And I was kind of surprised. She said, awful. She said, there was nothing life-giving about it. The people weren't alive. The message was condemning. She then explained several tenets of the message. And I'm like, gosh, I'm so sorry, honey.
Mm-hmm.
She goes, I just wanted to tell everybody, this is not true. She'd look around and say, are you guys listening to this?
Are
That's
you
how she
believing
felt.
this? Yeah.
That's how she felt. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this is why it's so important for us and why it's taken, honestly, 3 episodes for
Yeah.
this particular pillar that we could go on and on and on.
Yep.
And wherever we do go, we come back to this.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. Wherever we do go, yes, there is faithfulness. And yes, obedience is part of this. But I want to be in a relationship with my wife where she's not obedient, but rather she's faithful.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be in friendship with men that, yeah, I'm glad they're serving me, but I would so much rather them love me and me love them.
Well, it's like you've said plenty of times, Michael, how do you say it?
Yeah, you can serve someone and not be in love with them.
Thank you. So yeah, you can
You can serve
some-
someone and not be in love with them, but you can't be in love with someone
And not,
and not
serve
serve
them.
them. So there is that invitation to graduate and to move forward. The little things, Tom, you told a story last week. I just love that story that to know in Florida last week that at sunset, there are people that are sitting in their chairs all together watching the sun go down, and then they cheered.
Makes me think of that movie,
Yeah.
City of Angels. Remember that
Yeah.
Mhm.
movie where you sneak peek into the spiritual realm? In that film, it was sunrise.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the sun is coming up and all of the angels are there on the beach and it breaks the plane of the horizon and they all break out. Oh,
Yes.
That's right, yeah.
Remember that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, man.
So I have a question. In this hierarchy or this progression of intimacy, do you find it a little disruptive to be the bride?
Not anymore.
Because I know that's not really a category that
men
that we were given.
men-
yeah.
Be romanced.
Yeah,
as
romanced,
the bride.
intimacy. Again, I think it is a great question. Not anymore. I think that at some point that can be a little awkward for masculine hearts, but we're not talking about sex.
No.
We're talking about intimacy. And so I know in the family life lane and in our marriage conferences with the Rendezvous and the Rendezvous Project coming out,
Yeah.
sex is happening everywhere all the time. The world is just participating. But I don't think the world's experiencing intimacy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
As a matter of fact, that's why when there is no intimacy attached to the act of sex, it's harmful. Ultimately, it's damaging. That's why hearts get broken.
Yeah. You're
know.
giving something away and taking something from someone
Using.
that doesn't yet have the commitments that are to go along with that. Yeah, that's another podcast.
It is. It is. But I do want to
But why did
reiterate
you-
that
yeah.
to our male listeners. Sex is not intimacy.
Yeah. Why did you ask? That's
Well,
really-
because a season of my journey to coming to believe that God loved me, again, I mean, you get an experience, but over time you can forget, you can start to question. And after that experience in DC, I entered the church world, and about 15 years into it, I was pretty dry, not really alive as I was in that moment when I first met Jesus. But I got introduced to soaking prayer, which we talk about in our weekends. And it's a type of prayer where you allow yourself to, through your imagination or through words in worship songs, to follow along and enter your heart into a connection with God. And it's very, very powerful. Well, one of the CDs that was so helpful to me, and I highly recommend it, it's by Laura Woodley. It's called Loved. One of the songs on there, I soaked to this probably hundreds of times because this went on for like 3 years. And one of the lines in there is, "Wallflower, come dance with me. Broken one, you're just what I need." And it's like this idea that Jesus does want us to come close. Now, obviously, it's a metaphor, male, female, and that type of thing. But for some reason, that really spoke to my heart. I don't know why, but I think that the idea of being the bride of Christ, being able to be in love with Christ, obviously not in a male-female way, is a very powerful thing.
Yeah.
And it changed something in me over time that has stuck. It's been very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I asked, though, because it is, for most people, it would be a little bit perhaps quirky to think of yourself in that way. But we are, as a body, as a whole group of people, the bride of Christ.
It's part of the journey, Tom. I mean, I remember myself to a lesser degree probably, but when I watched The Shack and God is presented in a female, the feminine heart of God is presented in that film. I've spoken with plenty of folks that have seen that film that really struggle with that aspect of it. And myself, at first, I was, wait, so this is God. I thought God was a dude. What's going on? What's going on here?
Yeah.
And it was early in my journey when I saw that film. And if God has masculine and feminine attributes to his heart, well, then there must be things that he's pursuing in us, even as a red-blooded male.
Yeah.
That is part of the femininity or that perspective that he's built into our hearts. So even as I say that, I'm going, okay, I probably need to explore that a little bit more. You know, what does that mean?
Right.
It doesn't mean I'm female. It just means I'm made in the image of God. And God represents both genders. And so how does that look in my life?
Can he be tender?
That's right.
Can he be nurturing?
Yes.
Can he be sweet and kind?
Gentle.
And I don't want to make that, because women too are strong.
Of course.
And
fierce.
powerful and fierce, you know. But I think about, you know, how we're limited by our words in the physical realm in many ways, in gender. But I think to your question, and I love that you shared a little bit more about it, that this is bigger than that. Intimacy, romance, connectedness. And we have a physical realm reality of that for sure in a marriage relationship, in oneness.
Yeah.
But we see in John 17, Greg, I mean, holy cow. It is Jesus's prayer for his friends and for the followers that are to come. He says, I pray that they are one, like I am one with you, like we are one.
Yeah, I love that, Michael. I love what we were talking about earlier, which is he says that right before he goes to the cross, right before he's betrayed. He's telling Father, I want them to experience us the way we experience us. Michael, you wrote a great quote about this in your book, The Heart of a Warrior, and it's talking about belovedness and it being a choice and getting back up into Daddy's lap. But here, let me read this. Experiencing our belovedness is a choice. Letting, allowing, turning, engaging. I love that word. Engaging, reaching up to take our Father's hand, crawling up into his lap. All of those expressions describe what we need to do again and again and again to receive God's love. Intimacy.
That's soaking right there.
Soaking, exactly. That's what I was thinking. It's our part in the collaboration that we reach out our hand, is what Michael's saying. Doing so both fills and fulfills our relationship with Father. His pursuit of us with love is met with our wanting to be caught. Our wanting. I love that. We see that in John 17. He's like, Father, I want these knuckleheads to have the same thing that we have.
Yeah. Yeah. Add that just before John 17 is vines and branches. I mean, that's intimate connection, life flow, blood flow, to be grafted in and to be the branches and he the vine. So powerful. And I think from time to time, even as a 55-year-old man, honestly, brothers, there's times now and again when I feel like the little boy who's reaching his arms up and asking his father to pick him up. Along the masculine or feminine journey, you know, though we might be at a certain mile marker on the calendar of our days, yet our heart, and we talked about this in the last episode, that, you know, our heart's much larger than that, even wonderfully more complicated than that. I was with a group of men last night, and we were talking about boyhood, and it was really quiet for a bit. They didn't have a lot to offer, and then it was so funny. I said something about seeing my parents' picture albums, photo albums of when I was a boy. And there I am with cowboy hat and 6-shooter cap gun pistols. I think I was 5. And it was like I unlocked their archive of memories. And they started remembering Christmases as boys. They started remembering gifts and then birthdays. And it just went on and on. But my point is, there's times that this young self, young heart, adolescent, 20-something years are just kind of there behind me. And I don't reminisce often about them. Sometimes something will come up and give me a chance to do that. But I believe that in soaking, in that imaginative prayer, and in certain moments, I'm not in charge of how I'm coming to Jesus. There's just times I just can only explain that I feel young, the boy in me needing intimacy. And then there's times I need intimate counsel as a father at 55, 3 kids, wife, 30 years. I mean, intimate counsel.
Yeah. One of the things that young boys need often, and you shared stories about doing this, Greg, on previous podcasts, is validation. I find myself coming to God often from that position or from that posture as feeling young, feeling like, Daddy, I need to know that I have what it takes. I need to know that I can do this, that you're with me, and being validated that way. So hold on to what you're thinking, Greg. Greg looks like he's about to bust out. So we're going to take a break.
Stories.
Yeah, we're going to take a break. And then when we come back, we'll hear some more stories.
Ladies, what if you or the women in your life could live from a heart that is settled in love, convicted of its worth, and moved by purpose and true desire? What if you could live unafraid and unashamed, sure that you belong? Welcome to The Deepening Journey, a 6-session video resource and journal workbook designed to be experienced together with other women or even on your own. It was recorded at Zoe's Deepening Weekend for Women, birthed out of friendship and conversations between our guide team. Learn to experience belovedness. Our hearts need rest, comfort, clarity. We need a chance to be still and hear from God. We invite you to explore with us how we were made to live in God's kingdom and to flourish. Learn what comes against that flourishing and experience the offer of healing, integration, and restoration. Visit thedeepeningjourney.com to launch your voyage into a new chapter in God's kingdom.
Welcome back to the Exploring More podcast, where we're talking about pillar number 1, intimacy, oneness, connectedness with God. We're maybe on the last half of the last session, 3 sessions we've done on this. And you brought up a word before the break. You said it, validation.
Validation, yeah. It's
a powerful idea, because I've learned how important, significant it is on the masculine journey, on the feminine journey, to be validated by someone that you love and trust is so powerful. And again, so intimate and
ties
so
back
strong
to intimacy, directly tied to intimacy. You've got to have intimacy with that person. You got to have intimacy with God in order to receive validation from them.
Yeah.
It's very foundational. I mean, knowing and being known, it's back to our definition of intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I got a story, and you guys were there, Tom. You remember when I turned 50, we had a big gathering, and it wasn't a surprise party. That wasn't the surprise. But Robin had gathered a bunch of my friends in this inviting process and had, behind my back, Robin and 25, 30 friends put resources together financially. Nothing wrong with a Camry. I'd been driving a Camry for a few years, 4 or 5 years.
I can't even imagine that.
And it was given to the ministry.
Yeah, they're great cars. I just can't imagine you in it anymore.
Yeah, I was a truck guy, and at that point, I had a truck that was in need of transmission, tires, brakes. It was a good $4,000. Engine lights are coming on pretty regularly, and so that truck found a new owner in a new home somewhere. So it was a beautiful gift, this Camry. But for my 50th birthday, they walked me outside of this party, and there's this new to me,
the
wonderful,
white
beautiful
stallion.
White Stallion, yes, truck, Ford F-150. It was overwhelming.
Yeah.
It was so validating.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there was such a rivalry amongst all of us. I know some that were there. I don't know who was happier, them or me, in the whole thing.
Yeah.
It was just like, why are you crying, Tom? I'm the one who got the truck. Well, he was part of the team that gave it, and it just brought joy. It was just such an intimate thing. And so now the beautiful thing is I can't get in and out of that truck without knowing that this is a token of my friendships and their expression for me. So,
That's so good.
yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. Similarly, it's been a part of my heart for a long time, but helping other people with intimate connections, like we've talked about, is part of, I think, the glory God's placed in my life. But as of late, I've really been burdened by those that don't have it, and seeing a lot of that with churches and folks with the Allies mission that we have here at Zoe. And I've not only been burdened, but have felt very missional, that I want to work tirelessly to see that be different for those that we have the opportunity to have relationship with. Even to the point, Michael, where as I'm thinking about it even now, I think I've probably worked my fingers a little more to the bone than they should be. That I've went a little too far with it just because it's been such a burden. I mean, I'll have to, talking about exploring intimacy with God, I need to explore that a little bit. But over the last several months, we've seen a lot of fruit for that.
Yeah.
So as
Your hard work has produced some incredible.
Yeah, I'm a
fruit.
3 on the Enneagram, so I'm trying to also fight not feeling like I'm just bringing this up because I'm a 3 and I like to be patted on the back.
Like to be. That's funny.
But no, I mean, in transparency, there's been a few instances as of late where we've seen this fruit, and we had a phone call. We're really enjoying using Zoom and getting to see people's faces. And we've had a few regional kind of Zoom calls recently where we've invited individuals into, let's talk about your region and what the good that God's up to there. And so we had one the other day with some men in Tennessee and what God's got going on. And then I had a text from one of those individuals, even last night. He was saying, Greg, in my ministry, I'm teaching people to be intimate, but I'm doing it from a behavioral standpoint. I'm wanting them to experience God, but I'm doing it behaviorally rather than talking about it from just a plain love, intimacy standpoint. And what you said during our time together on Zoom showed me that not only do I have to be intimate, but I have to model for them intimacy.
There's more, yeah.
Yep.
There is more. And so God just came in. Last night, God's like, I see you. You're doing so good. I'm so proud of you.
Mm-hmm.
It was just so rich and intimate. It was so good.
Mm-hmm. That is good. And if you don't have the eyes to see, you said this before, you may not realize that there was a validation ceremony. It may not be all your friends in a truck. It's a phone call. It's God gave a package to somebody else, right? There's a delivery person who's important, a man in Tennessee who is validating something you said. And if you miss that God's in all of that,
That's the point.
then you miss God.
Right.
Mhm.
God arranged it.
And so there's sometimes he'll do direct download. He'll drone it right on under the porch of your heart. I mean, boom. And there's other times he wants to involve others in the delivery system.
Mhm.
If the enemy can hijack this system, right, and wound us through others, then he's taken advantage of a system that God created in order to love others.
Right.
Validation, initiation, acceptance, and worth and belonging. All of those things are just part of this thing that we are trying to get our arms around, love and being loved, knowing and being known. That's a great day-to-day example, Greg. The email that you sent Sherry.
Oh, the text a little while ago?
Yeah, the text.
About being a witness to her life.
That came to you, and that's where that went. I should tell Sherry that. Take co-credit for all the good ideas you have.
That's right.
Take co-credit.
Yeah.
And you know what? All the bad ideas, you probably ought to take some co-credit on that one. The enemy, the false self, your true self getting kind of pushed away. But that's the offer for our friends and allies, that God is in way, way, way more of this than you might know. The secret admirer wants to be known.
Yeah.
I had a moment recently. It was, last week. My son, Steven, was house sitting for us and dog sitting. We have 2 Labradors at home. And so when Sherry and I travel, we need somebody to kind of come and hang out with them. They're old.
They are old.
They are. They're like 11, pushing 13. I mean,
they're awesome.
But they're great. They're still pretty high energy. But I
Salty.
don't like putting them in a kennel because they're old, so I like having someone come and stay at the house. So we were going to be gone for the better part of 2 weeks. And so we had Steven come down and stay with the dogs and watch the house while Sherry and I were gone. Well, February is great time of year. I love it. Sherry and I go on vacation in February, typically, Valentine's Day, all that deal. But my dad on February 9th in 1994 passed away. So I think about my dad every February 9th, and kind of mark that occasion. I think about him way more often than just every year on February 9th. So it's during this time period, my son comes down and we go out on vacation. And when we came back, he hung around for another day or two before he had to go back home. He and I were hanging out together and getting ready to go to bed. He's staying in the bedroom upstairs, and we're kind of shutting the house down. He was putting some dishes in the dishwasher, and I'm turning lights off and that kind of evening routine, make sure the doors are locked. And he stops me and he says, just out of the blue, he goes, "Hey, Dad, I know that I've had you around a lot longer than you had your dad. And I just want you to know that I appreciate you and I love that I have you in my life."
Come on, man.
Yeah.
Out of the blue,
fantastic.
man. Out of the blue.
What a gift.
I was taken aback. I'm struck emotionally now, but honestly, in the moment, I just was kind of dumbstruck. Like,
Yeah.
okay, buddy.
The more you
Caught
thought
off
about
guard.
it, it meant more and
But
more
then,
and more.
yeah, but then because I was halfway down the hallway heading to bed when he says this to me, so I turned back around and we embraced and then went off to bed, but
What a great story.
but what a moment of validation. And, my dad was great and he loved us well, but, he's right. I had him for a short period of time. And so to hear him recognize the importance of having a dad around, having me around.
What a
I haven't
validation.
fully unpacked all that yet, but I
Yeah.
look forward to doing it.
Yeah.
That's so good.
That's a great
Love
story.
that.
Intimate story of an intimate moment, tears. And when an 8 cries, you better call timeout and
That's right. You're being vulnerable.
say, ho,
Wait a second.
ho.
Yeah.
That's good.
That's so good.
That's great. That's a great story. Well, good for Stephen. And it's a beautiful example, again, of packages for our heart coming through and from the hearts of others and knowing that God sees you and that you're a good dad and that you're a good man. You don't need a room full of 500 people and a trophy and clapping. I know most people would trade that moment for that moment
That's
Right.
right.
if they had to really choose,
Mm-hmm. I agree.
that kind of recognition or that kind of intimate validation. That's incredible.
In the
story.
dark, in the
Yeah.
dining room.
Yeah.
It was great.
Unexpected.
Snuck up
Kind
on.
of surprised you. It's beautiful.
100% surprised me. I know where I was and what time it was and what day it was when my dad died. But Stephen never knew him. Stephen was born after my dad had passed away. So for him to recognize when that happened, the time of year that it was, and how that impacts me and how I think about it, for Stephen to even be aware
So
of
it's a very intimate thing
sensitive
to
it.
say.
Yeah, that's
honestly.
really good.
That is good.
Well, I think it's a good one to land on. Honestly,
I
I
do
just
too.
proud of you for sharing it. And yeah, friends, I hope that we didn't just defend this idea, this pillar, or promote it, but rather you felt invited
Yeah.
into an exploration of more of the intimacy and oneness and connectedness with God that you were made for and that we were made for. That there's nothing better than experiencing and encountering that and living to tell about it, to tell stories. You don't need a podcast platform to tell them, but I think you're right, Tom. You do need to ask God for the eyes to see
Mm-hmm.
and ears to hear, to do a work in your heart, getting everything out of the way that could possibly be in the way of receiving love, because this is about receiving. All of us have had our hearts handled pretty roughly, actually, along the journey, and not everybody meant to. We all have our wounded moments, and from that, the false self can be constructed. So deconstructing that is actually an intimate
Mm-hmm.
that too is an intimate process with Jesus, that he will show you where you've been hurt, invite you to bring those hurts like you did, Greg, to him, talk to you about them, and then ask you if you'll give that hurt to him, and
Trust
he'll
him.
trust him to bring healing, forgiveness, sometimes for the wounders when you're ready. He's just not a demander. Intimacy and love will win in that. So thanks for closing this one out with us, SJ, and that story. And yeah, if you have any questions, concerns, you want to write to us, exploringmore@zoe.org.
Mm-hmm.
Exploringmore@zoe.org. If this is your first podcast, then There's a lot of stuff on the website. Go there, and this has been great.
Yeah.
We'll step into the next pillar next week on the 4 pillars of Zoe. Look forward to that.
Going to be talking about orientation.
Who you are, where you are, and the good God's up to in your life.
So important. Also, if you're looking for more information about the Allies initiative that Greg referenced earlier in the podcast, you want to visit zoe.org/allies, and there's all kinds of information there. If you're looking for friendship, fellowship, guidance, counsel on how to walk with other men in this message, you want to hit up Greg and Jim Chenet at zoe.org/allies for that help. They're doing a great job there. Really the growing legions of men that are going on this journey, and all of us need other men with us into the foxhole and around us. So check that out. And then go to the store, zoe.org/store, and we've got tons of free resources for you there. So go ahead and go check that out. Thank you so much for listening. Leave us a rate or a review on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps other listeners to podcasts find us. And we will see you next week when we explore more.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoe.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the Life of More by visiting Zoe on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoe on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.